For the longest time, we've thought of the nation-state as the ultimate authority, the final word. But is that really true anymore? Today, we're asking a question that sounds simple but has a super complex answer. In our world today, who's really calling the shots? Let's try and unpack this whole thing.
So on the one hand, you see this huge push for power from the ground up. I mean, it's happening all over the globe. You've got indigenous movements, like these Maori demonstrators, and you see regional campaigns from Scotland to Catalonia, all demanding more local control. But then, at the exact same time, power is being pulled together at a much, much higher level. Huge global challenges are basically forcing leaders of entire continents, like the African Union you see here, to create authorities that work above the level of a single country. And that, right there, is the central puzzle we're looking at. When power is being pulled in opposite directions at the same time, where does that leave us? Who actually has the final say?
Okay, so for hundreds of years, the nation-state was basically the main event in politics. It was the most important player on the stage. But, well, that's changing, and it's changing fast.
I think the best way to picture what's happening is to imagine the nation-state getting squeezed from two different directions at once. You've got pressure from below, and you've got pressure from above.
So from below, you have this really strong pull to decentralize. This could be driven by unique cultural identities or ethnic nationalism, or sometimes just a simple belief that, hey, decisions are best made by the people they actually affect. This draws power down, away from the capital city.
And then, from above, you've got these massive global problems. We're talking climate change, pandemics, huge economic crises that no single country can possibly solve on its own. So this forces nations to work together, sucking power up to these international groups.
This new, kind of messy situation has a name. It's called multi-level governance. And it's just what it sounds like. It's a world where power isn't in just one place. Instead, it's always being shared and argued over between local, national, and even global levels.
So let's start by digging into that first part of the squeeze, the pressure from the inside. How do countries actually organize their power internally? Well, you can basically break it down into two main models.
You've got federal systems where power is officially split, like written down in a constitution, between the central government and the regional governments. And then you have unitary systems, where all the ultimate power, the sovereignty, rests in one single national government.
This table really gets to the heart of it. Think about what this actually means on the ground. In a federal system, a state like California has certain powers that the national government in D.C. can't just take away. They're protected. But in a unitary system, the national government is the ultimate boss. It can, in theory, change or even dissolve regional governments because their power is more of a gift from the center, not a guaranteed right.
So why would a country go with the federal option? Well, usually it's a practical choice. It can be a great way to manage a gigantic country, like the US or Brazil. And it can also be absolutely crucial for holding together a really diverse place with lots of different languages or ethnic groups, like you see in Nigeria and India.
Okay, but what if you're a unitary state and you're feeling that same pressure from within to decentralize? Well, your main tool is something called devolution. This is where the central government hands down some of its powers to regional bodies. Think of the parliaments in Scotland or Wales, but without actually giving up its ultimate authority.
And it's really important to remember that not all unitary states look the same. The UK, for example, was traditionally super centralized. But France, another classic unitary state, has actually spent decades actively decentralizing power. It just goes to show you that these labels aren't set in stone. Countries can, and they do, adapt.
All right, so that's the pressure pushing down from inside a country. Now let's flip it around and look at the other side of that squeeze, the forces that are pulling power up beyond the nation-state altogether.
The term for this is transnational regionalism. It's pretty straightforward. It's just the process of countries in the same part of the world teaming up either to solve shared problems or to create new opportunities together.
And this teamwork can have different goals. Sometimes it's all about security, which gives you defensive alliances like NATO. Other times, it's political. Groups form to promote shared values, like the African Union does. But probably the biggest driver has been economic, which has led to these incredibly powerful trade blocs all around the world. And nowhere has this whole process gone further than in Europe. Just look at the European Parliament. It's a really powerful example of what we call supranational authority. It's a whole level of government that literally operates above the nation-state, with members who are directly elected to make laws for over 400 million people. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
Yeah, the European Union is by far the most advanced and, frankly, the most complicated example of this regional integration anywhere on the planet, so it's definitely worth taking a closer look at how it even happened.
It really is a story of taking it one step at a time. It started really small back in 1952, with a deal on coal and steel that was designed to make war between France and Germany physically impossible. From there, it grew into an economic community, then a real single market, and finally, in 1993, the European Union was officially born, a political project that would even launch its own currency, the euro. Okay, it's a complicated system, for sure, but let's just quickly break down the main players. You've got the Commission. Think of it as the executive branch. It proposes new laws. Then there's the Council, which is where ministers from all the member countries get together to make the big decisions. We've already seen the Parliament, the part that people directly vote for. And then, and this is a big one, you have the European Court of Justice, whose rulings on EU law can actually overrule the national laws of member states. That is a huge deal.
So we've got power being pulled down to cities and regions, and at the same time, it's being sucked up to these big international groups. What does this messy, multi-level world actually look like in real life?
Well, this is not just some academic debate. It has real life or death stakes. Take the recent Tigray War in Ethiopia. It was just a brutal, horrifying conflict that was being fought on many levels at once. You had the regional government of Tigray against the national government of Ethiopia, which then allied with the whole other country, Eritrea, and all the while you had other world powers and international groups trying to get involved. This tangled, deadly web, that is what multi-level politics can look like.
And that brings us right back to our big final question. With all these forces pushing power down to the local level and pulling it up to the global level, you really have to ask yourself, is the nation-state, this political unit that has dominated the world for centuries, is it slowly becoming a thing of the past? Something to think about.